A very good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to all. I, Dr. Pallavi Saxena, iLEAPS SSC member, and Dr. Samina, iLEAPS IPO, welcomes you all on the occasion of our fourth episode of iLEAPS Global Colloquium series. So before I go into the detail, let's have a very brief introduction about iLEAPS, what the iLEAPS is. So iLEAPS is Integrated Land Ecosystem Atmosphere Processes System, and it is a global research project of Future Earth. iLEAPS provides understanding of how interacting physical, chemical, and biological processes transport and transform energy and matter through the land atmosphere interface. The prime purpose of this colloquium is to introduce the scientific society people with the distinguished scientists from different parts of the world. Especially, it's a great opportunity for the early career researchers to interact with the speaker directly and can establish the bridge between the ideas and the knowledge through this interface. So today we have our speaker, Professor Lokesh Sahu, who is a professor in Space and Atmospheric Sciences Division, Physical Research Laboratory, Ahmedabad, India. After completing PhD from PRL, he received the Japan Society for the Promotion of Science Fellowship to work at the University of Tokyo during 2006 to 2008 and a special researcher during 2008 to 2010. He joined PRL as a faculty member in 2010 and has been focused on characterizing the key emission and atmospheric processes controlling the levels of volatile organic compounds in different environments of India and over the northern Indian Ocean. Professor Sahu has published over 120 research papers in peer-reviewed journals with high impact factors. He was involved in several research projects of NASA, JST, ISRO, APN, etc. He is a member of the Atmospheric and Ocean Sciences Expert Committee for the Indian Arctic Expedition and nodal faculty for Gujarat, the National Clean Air Program, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India. He received the NASA Group Achievement Award 2009 for outstanding accomplishments in the success of ARCTAS mission. So today he will put light on a very important topic about controlling the VOC's composition over the Indian subcontinent and surrounding oceanic region. And he will highlight the progress and opportunities for the measurement-based studies of VOC in South Asia. So I again welcome Professor Sahu for his talk. Professor Sahu, now the floor is all yours.
Okay, so thank you, Shamina and Pallavi, for inviting me to this iLEAPS Colloquium series. And can I share now? Yeah, let me try. Windows, share. Is my slide visible?
Yeah. Yes.
Right. Okay. So just point as well. Okay. So this is very important topic. It's such that you have been covering. In I was just going through the series of colloquium already presented, and it's very, very important. In this connection, I would like to add something more on that, and that is about studies of VOCs, particularly related to the impact of different sources and, more importantly, different atmospheric processes or the South Asia region. As you know, South Asia region is kind of, we don't have much measurement of VOCs, and in terms of understanding of VOCs, related to the emission and the atmospheric chemistry. So there is a lot more to be done. So before I go ahead, I'd like to just tell you about my institute. I am from Physical Research Laboratory. That comes under Department of Space, Government of India. It is in the This is a map of kind of Gujarat state, and we are located in Ahmedabad city. And this is one of the oldest institute in Department of Space. Basically, all the space programs in India started from this place on. So we have several campuses. One is we have Mount Abu, that is a telescope, and then we have solar observatory in that. And we have all basic areas of scientific research: planetary science, astronomy, solar physics, space and atmospheric sciences. So I belong to space and atmospheric sciences division, and there are other divisions like geosciences and atomic molecular division, and as well as theoretical physics division. So coming back to the topic, when you talk about volatile organic compounds, okay, so there are many sources, as you know, about the reactive trace gases, including VOCs, and we have oceanic sources, terrestrial biogenic, and several kinds of anthropogenic activities. They all produce, basically almost all activities produce VOCs, more or less. But if you talk globally, about 80 to 90% comes, according to the estimate, it comes from the biogenic sources, and remaining 10%. But it's the global. But if you go to the regional to local scale, the contributions may change significantly. Nonetheless, once these sources release VOCs, they go through the cycles of reactions in the atmosphere, mostly initiated by the oxidation by hydroxyl radicals. So ultimately, then they end up producing ozone and secondary organic aerosols. So this emission, of course, is near our surface process, near the Earth's surface, and it is just above the atmosphere, where the reactions take place. But the impact is not only confined near the surface itself, because atmospheric dynamics, particularly the convective activities, more important in tropics, they can quickly transport these emission as well as the constituents produced by the photochemical reactions to the pre-troposphere or even in the upper troposphere, and their impact may be very, very different than what their impact we have near the surface. So this kind of understanding is very, very important, because we have all these sources, whether you talk about biogenic sources, because they ultimately depend on temperature and the intensity of solar radiation. So we have very, very favorable conditions in South Asia region as far as emissions from this biomass loading and oceanic sources concerned. And as you know that we have a lot of anthropogenic activities, because we have a large number of population in this part of the world. So both anthropogenic as well as natural sources, they contribute significantly. And of course, the reactions are very, very important as far as photochemistry is concerned in tropics, because of a lot of OH radicals in this region. So, but as I mentioned that VOCs are not a single compound, are not a few compounds. They are kind of numerous compounds, and they have different kind of reaction rates, and not only different, they are released in different proportion from different sources, but they also have different reaction rates in the atmosphere. And most of these reactions happen because of oxidation by OH radicals, directly by reaction with ozone and NO3. So it is very important to measure the concentration of different VOCs, that is species. So why it is important? As mentioned, that their reactivities are reaction and constants are different, and hence their oxidation capacity to by reaction with a particular oxidant can vary significantly. So ultimately the composition is it is important to know the VOC composition to understand the oxidation capacity in a particular region. So why we have to know the oxidation capacity? Because as you saw, not only VOCs but other gases like methane also react with OH radicals. So if if the oxidation capacity is changed because of change in the abundance of more reactive gases, then it will have implications to the lifetime of longer lived gases like methane. So in this picture, it is shown that because of, if there is a climate warming, then there will be a lot of more and more emissions of biogenic compounds. There will be more formation of ozone, again, which is a greenhouse gas, and then it will impact the lifetime of methane because of change in the oxidation capacity. So this is kind of goes into the feedback loop, and ultimately it affects not only the atmospheric chemistry or formation of secondary pollutants or secondary species, but also the greenhouse effect indirectly. So another important aspect why we should have measurement of different VOCs. Suppose we want to estimate the aging effect, because once any species is released in the atmosphere, it goes to the aging, whether it is chemical aging or physical aging. So if you have measurement of certain pair of compounds, time resolved measurements, for example, you have benzene and toluene, assuming that they are emitted from the similar kind of sources and they are lost from the atmosphere by different similar kind of process, which is reaction with OH, then that combination, that pair can be used to estimate the photochemical age by applying photochemical reaction mechanism. So ultimately, if you apply this, then this kind of equation you get, where you need to put the initial concentration of or initial ratios of toluene by benzene, for example, and that is the ratio ones when it is emitted and it is not processed in the atmosphere dynamically or photochemically. And then you have continuous measurement, and this is real-time measurements of toluene and benzene. So with these two, one can always estimate. Of course, there are assumptions, but they provide a very good indicator for the age, to understand the aging process, and hence to understand the formation rates of different secondary constituents in the atmosphere. For example, it is given here that if you have toluene and benzene measurements, and if you see the relationship, this means that their ratios, their slopes are much higher in the nighttime compared to the daytime. So this kind of relationship can be exploited to estimate the photochemical age. Let's talk about the sources. If you talk about the global, so I'll try to focus. Of course, there have been a lot of studies of VOCs mostly targeting the anthropogenic sources and their impact, but little is known about the biogenic compounds, even though it contributes more or less about 80 to 90%. So if you see the distribution, there's mostly the biogenic emissions contribute in tropical and subtropical regions. And if you see the biomass burning coming also in the picture, then it is mostly in the tropical region. So tropical region is kind of, important for biogenic sources as well as anthropogenic sources and biomass burning sources. Why this kind of pattern distribution we get is very obvious, because we have very favorable conditions, particularly in tropical and subtropical regions, which control the synthesis of VOCs in the vegetation, light and temperature. The intensity of light is significantly higher compared to the high latitude site, and same way the temperature is high. So, sorry. So this region is very, very important as far as various kinds of emission is concerned, the anthropogenic or biogenic. When you come to, if you want to know more details about South Asia regions, so that the previous slide gives about very broad picture about the biogenic emission. But if you want to see the regionally, it's not like all kind of vegetation give similar kind of VOCs. No, not only they give different kind of VOC, but they are strain the potential to emit different VOCs also vary from the plant species to plant species. So we have kind of diversity, huge diversity over the South Asia region. So we have of course, about 1.7 billion population. So of course, we have a lot of anthropogenic activities, but we have kind of different kind of climatic zone. For example, we have Western Ghats of India, which is kind of covered with forest, central forest regions, and then foothills of Himalaya. So they are kind of so important sources of biogenic biosis, and but we don't know actually what kind of views is coming and how much views is coming. So this is kind of completely open area to work on, and it is important because if you want to control the secondary species coming from the VOCs related to climate change or atmospheric chemistry, we have to know what are the other sources, like natural sources, or which you can say background sources for if you want to address the anthropogenic contributions. So this is very important to understand. Not only the emission, but dynamics over this part of the world is very, very important. As you know that South Asia part is the dynamics, the wind circulation is strongly driven by the monsoon circulation. You have southwest monsoon during July, August, September, and then we have winter monsoon during December, January, February. So completely opposite kind of wind pattern we get. During monsoon, we get cleaner air, and then during winter, we get polluted continental air masses. And this pre-monsoon and post-monsoon is kind of, it represents the transition between these two dominant circulations. But it's not just that they will redistribute the emissions happening over the land, but they also contribute to the emission of biogenic VOCs itself. For example, particularly in the coastal region, okay. So because of monsoon and the vegetation index changes, and then that can change the VOC emissions. Particularly if you see the coastal regions, so during the southwest monsoon, so there can be a lot of oceanic air masses coming, and the coastal ocean is kind of productive ocean that also releases a lot of VOCs. So we can have combinations or interplay of different sources controlling the VOC compositions, particularly over the coastal regions. So that happens, so that interplay changes whether it is dominated by continental air masses or marine air masses. That changes from seasons to season. And this productivity also changing with the season. The ocean productivity, which is a kind of important source of many VOCs like isoprene and monoproteins and other species. So that itself is changing indirectly, in a sense that your dynamics affect the productivity, and then that affects the composition of VOCs. So it's a very complex region in a way to quantitatively address the issues related to emission and atmospheric processes of VOCs. This is kind of surface level transport. If you look at the vertical transport, then again this region is very, very this region is known for the deep activities. Deep connectivities can take the emissions from the surface to the higher heights, and it depends on what kind of conditions actually is prevailing. Under La Nina conditions, we have very deep frequency of deep connection is very, very high, but during El Nino conditions, we have kind of inhibited vertical mixing. But these two conditions are independently important for the biogenic emissions as well, because El Nino conditions are known for the warmer conditions compared to La Nina. So that will have implications on the biogenic emissions itself, and then later on their distributions. So such understandings are very, very important, but we don't have much knowledge about this processes, dynamical process, how it is interlinked with the emissions and compositions of VOCs. But they are important because some results I will try to show where their importance can be, inferred. For example, this is kind of very some all primary VOCs, and then this is kind of we have measurements throughout there, and we got a very standard signal of very low concentration during the monsoon period when convection is there, and during the winter when continental is there, air is there, we have very elevated concentration. So this is kind of very strong seasonality if you see in the levels of this non-methane hydrocarbons. But if I compare with this seasonality with the seasonality reported in high latitude regions, this is the seasonality or the tropical region is much stronger than what we found over the latitude. So what could be the reason? One, of course, if you don't consider dynamics, it is, of course, one can say that in the summer time or summer monsoon time, we have high OH radicals, which is removing this species in a very efficient way. So that could be one of the reasons. But that doesn't answer the seasonality, the very stronger seasonality or the tropical region. That can be one of the reasons. But earlier, nobody has addressed the role of the southwest, the air of cleaner air from the oceanic regions during the southwest monsoon, when the relatively cleaner air comes from the Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal. That can also contribute to the lower levels. And this air, oceanic air, is also associated with the deep convection. So not only the mixing on horizontal level or advection, but also the vertical. And that's why this is very important. This convective dynamics is very important. So this part, how the convection drops the pollutants, that means it basically ventilates the pollutants from the surface. And this is the next slide, which presents the kind of, this is based on, this is the level of very reactive VOCs like your ethane and butanes, etc. And this was based on aircraft burst sampling between, in upper troposphere between 10 to 14 kilometers of 10 to 12 kilometers of height. And what we see here, if you put this data or measured over this region for different seasons, different months, then you get opposite seasonality. Here you see June, July, August months, and we have elevated levels in the upper troposphere, but near the surface we have lower levels here. So these are entirely, primary VOCs. There cannot be secondary formations. So the sources has to be the surface. So it clearly establishes the role of convective updraft of this reactive species. So implications, it's not only confined near the surface, but we have impact of these reactive VOCs in the troposphere, also in the upper troposphere. Another evidence is, based on this study. This study or the Nepal Climate Observatory, that is at in the lower Himalayas, just about 5 kilometers above the sea level. They, based on the measurements or this remote location, is found that the biogenic VOCs like isoprene, monoterpenes, and sesquiterpenes, they are found to be in significant amounts for this site. Okay, so this can, the photochemical processes involving these biogenic VOCs are known to contribute the aerosol production at this height. So in this study, it is said that all aerosols measured at this height were mostly of biogenic origin, with little evidences of anthropogenic pollutants. And in this study, it's mentioned that Himalayan region may act as an aerosol factor and contribute substantially to the pre-tropospheric air pollution in this region. So what I mean to say is that whether this, of course, has to be also updraft, means kind of, again, convective activities or orographic driven winds. Another study, of course, this is not for the Asia region, South Asia region, and this is very very recent study by Tripathi et al. And this is based on very extensive measurement over Amazon. Amazon is a kind of dense forest region, and there's a lot of emissions of BVOCs. And of course, this region is known for the convective activities, deep convective activities. So based on very intensive campaigns and extensive measurements of various kinds of biogenic VOCs, isoprene and isoprene oxidation product as well, you see that of course the concentrations are very, very high near the surface, near just above the canopy maybe. But of course, then there is a kind of decrease, but then suddenly, it increases in the troposphere, 10 to 12 meter, what we have also noticed in the South Asia region. So this is a kind of feature of convective dynamics. So it takes, it is not dumped in the lower or middle troposphere, but it is when because the energy is very high, the convective energy is very high, so it keeps absorbing, particularly in the tropical region. So ultimately it reaches up to this higher heights. So you can see that they measure during both day and night, and there's found differences as well. In the daytime, you see lower levels of but the difference is more as far as isoprene concerned. So in night you don't have chemistry, so there is no loss of isoprene. But if you see the isoprene oxidation products, more or less you can have the differences are less between the day and night. So there is a the impact of convective dynamics as well as photochemistry that impact the region. So, but such studies we don't have evidence, because in previous slides which I talked here, we don't have evidence here, or because most of these species are anthropogenic, we don't have biogenic compounds for this region. So this will be interesting to see if we have such profiles for isoprene or monoterpenes. Okay. So with this background and some level of dwelling on gap areas, of course we have been involved in the VOC measurement here in India. PR has contributed significantly to the initiative of VOC studies in India. And in this my lab picture, and we have state-of-the-art instruments like PTR top MS, various kinds of VOC analyzers, and we go to different locations. Of course, these are not the only locations, but few examples I have put here, like Udaipur, Delhi, Ahmedabad, all polluted cities. Big cities, at least I can say Delhi is of course polluted city. And we had done extensive measurements of VOCs in this region. Also, we go to the ocean. We have done many. These are all just very few recent pictures. And we have also gone to the sites in Western Gulf Forest region, but a lot more to be done. But we have kind of lots of campaigns over the urban regions and also over the oceanic regions. But we need to do more over the forested region or rural regions of India. So this was a campaign where we did two simultaneous measurements. Simultaneous measurements at two sites, urban sites and suburban sites in New Delhi. And we tried to understand the sources of VOCs and their variability region to region, because during this season, this site at suburban was in the downwind of the Delhi. So with this, of course, we publish detailed results in various papers, but the important thing is that we try to see the influence of different sources. Of course, there are mixed, but episodically, sometimes we see the prominent signatures of a particular source. So with that combination of various kinds of VOC mixture and the relative contributions we could see. Of course, we used the air mass trajectory as well, and we could see the different distributions, different compositions of VOCs in different types of air masses. Okay, so such is, and this, the combination is not only changing from one, the side, two sides are not very far, but the features were very, very different. And that's what in this picture, in this slide, we have the left panel is for urban side, and we have right panel suburban side. We use certain method like the source tracer ratio method to to kind of estimate the contributions of biogenic sources or secondary versus the anthropogenic sources. So in green, you can see the biogenic or secondary. It can be both. We don't have separation between biogenic or secondary here, but of course we have separated them from the primary anthropogenic sources. What we see here is that at the urban side, we have larger influences of direct anthropogenic sources. But at suburban side, we have relatively higher contributions coming from the biogenic or secondary sources in New Delhi as well. Particularly, you can see there is enhancement of isoprene, which is biogenic, but we don't see such features at urban sites. Okay, so in a summary, that we can say that this the composition of VOCs even within a city varies significant. So there is a lot of heterogeneity in terms of distributions of VOCs because they are short-lived, and the sources are also not kind of, you have different local sources within a city, so that influences the variations or time dependency of VOC composition. I talked about the biogenic VOCs, and of course, if you go in the, because nowadays isoprene is also coming, it is very, very established fact that isoprene also comes significantly from the anthropogenic sources. So it is kind of challenging to separate the contributions coming from the biogenic sources from vegetation and from the anthropogenic sources like vehicular activities. So, but with certain normalization, after the normalization from the anthropogenic trace using this anthropogenic tracer, we tried to see the relationship with the temperature, and we see that February, March, April. So we are going from winter to summer, and you see the temperature dependency. Of course, at lower temperature, we don't have very clear dependency going, but once the temperature increases, ambient temperature increases 30 degrees, we see the changes. So in kind of summer conditions, we have huge enhancements of isoprene. This is coming from biogenic sources because we have normalized this relation, this concentration with the anthropogenic trace. So such relations also, of course, it is kind of empirical model, but at this level, okay, up to this, you can say it is kind of following similar kind of pattern. Qualitatively, at least we can say, so which stabilizes the contributions coming. But more importantly, it is important to estimate the contributions. Of course, this provides the evidence or features coming from the biogenic sources. So we also try to estimate that how the levels. Of course, it was relative level, not absolute level, biogenic contributions. So we found that about 30% increase in isoprene coming from biogenic sources. So with detailed composition studies, we stabilized. This is, of course, in general true for other tropical cities, should be true, but quantitatively it may vary. That you have in winter, we have dominance of aromatic compounds from anthropogenic sources, but oxygenated VOCs and isoprene, that means biogenic and secondary contributions, increases when you move towards summer. Of course, absolute level, the concentration decreases of everything if you go from winter to summer because of atmospheric dynamics coming into the picture. So these are kind of relative contributions, not the absolute contributions. So to understand, of course, many people, across the world, many researchers across the world, they try to understand the impact of COVID-19 lockdown, but mostly the studies what we found is about anthropogenic pollutants like PM 2.5 or certain aerosols or ozone. But there are few studies which report the changes in VOCs, and what we see here that we operated our instrument in PR continuously, and we found a significant decline during the summertime. Of course, that was also the lockdown. So of course, as I mentioned, that summer season itself is it's like you have a lot of removal of these VOCs from the atmosphere because of different meteorological conditions. So we corrected this data for the meteorology. So we have kind of similar kind of meteorological impact throughout the year, but still we found about, depending on this, is about like 50 to 80% of reductions in the levels of many VOCs. So it is stabilized that these are all local imposition of lockdown. So it tells that the localized sources are the main contributors, because during the transport we don't have much from the transport we don't have much VOCs coming into in big cities like Ahmedabad or in Delhi. So the most of the sources are very, very local sources. We also tried to see how the VOCs are coming from various other sources like landfill sites, and then we also studied that how this emissions from landfill site impact the residential area which is in the downwind. So these kind of studies we are also doing there, but such studies again from the landfill site areas are very, very limited. A recent study about another kind of VOC, that is mortar pits. Okay, this is a very recent study, and what we see here, we have again normalized BTEX is entirely anthropology. So we normalize with BTEX, alpha pinene and beta pinene. And this is the trend in temperature. Of course, there is a transition period, and this is winter, and this is kind of summer. So you can see that the trend is, the trend in this both alpha pinene and beta pinene are like change in the temperature itself, and that since if it is meteorological driven or OH driven changes, then the normalized monotropin concentration takes care of that. So it basically the change is due to the meteorological temperature. That's what we have done here. And again, it is same way like what I have shown for isopropyl. We see very clear picture of biogenic contribution coming to the urban areas. These are all, remember, these are all urban areas of India. And this is a semi-arid area. Ahmedabad is western part of India, is kind of semi-arid. We don't have lots of vegetation, but of course local vegetation is there. But still we see. So imagine if you go to the forested area, what kind of features we will get. But that has to be investigated over this part of the world. We did some chamber experiments as well to identify some what kind of VOCs, because these are all kind of preliminary studies. So we have initiated this kind of studies, and we found significant emissions of isoprene coming from the plants, which is mostly available found in western Ghats of India. As I mentioned, that it's not just that terrestrial vegetation, it's not just the anthropogenic emission, but we are all surrounded by the productive. The southeast part is surrounded by the productive northern Indian Ocean, and that can definitely impact the atmospheric composition in the coastal region. We have very long coastline basically. So it is also important to understand the emission air-sea exchange of VOCs from this productive waters of the Arabian Sea and Pacific. And this is one of the programs where we have In this, what we do is that uh, we have been fortunate enough to get the purse doing most of the, for all various major campaigns, and then we take on board our all equipments and run it continuously. Such experiments are kind of for the first time done over the northern Indian Ocean, where we have continuous measurements of VOCs in the marine air, marine boundary layer. And then, of course, the labels not only tell about the atmospheric process in the marine boundary layer, but also about oceanic processes which contribute to the air-sea exchange of these VOCs. So we have found some interesting results, and we have, so isoprene is kind of also significantly emitted from the chlorophyll, which is more intense. The density is much higher for the coastal regions of the Arabian Sea. So this is for the Arabian Sea, and you see this is northern coastal Arabian Sea. So we found huge enhancements, particularly associated with the significant increase in the chlorophyll concentration. So such studies are very important, because ultimately this, if it is in the coastal oceanic region, it will have impact. If the wind is coming from the ocean side, it will definitely impact the land areas near the coast. So, and hence, of course, take part in the various atmospheric chemistry and processes related to the secondary organic formation and ozone formation. This is important. So this is a recent, my student Mansi Gupta has conducted, as part of her PhD program. She's working in DMS. Of course, many people, you can include DMS as VOCs, because ultimately, they are more or less various features are like, they are also contribute to the formation of secondary aerosols like sulfur, and they are all, released. Ocean is a big source of sulfur. So DM is the most important source of biogenic sulfur compounds in the ocean. So it is released. Again, productivity plays very important role. So we try to understand particularly in the coastal region here. We have been trying to understand the contributions coming from the land, because these are vegetated. We have dense vegetation in this region. Sri Lanka, of course, southwest part of Sri Lanka is vegetated, and we have productive water where a lot of DMS emission is there. So how the interplay of, and of course there are corals also, which are also important source of DMS and other VOCs. So we are going to trying to understand the processes, emission, as well as atmospheric processes in a very local to regional scale, which is very important, because it will ultimately also help in the model studies as far as emission is concerned, as far as atmospheric processes is concerned. So this kind of studies are, of course, done for the first time. So we don't have such previous studies. DMS is particularly for the first time done over this part of the northern Indian Ocean. So we are trying to understand how the levels vary in the coastal region and in the open ocean regions. And in addition to the terrestrial vegetation, how the biogeochemical parameters control the emission of VOCs, because it is important to understand. And of course, ultimately the magnitude of air-sea exchange processes. In the beginning, I talked about the Himalayan regions. We have done some samplings over the lower Himalayas, okay, at between 400 to 3,000 meter heights at various sites, and we tried to see how the levels and their relative contributions varies with site to site. That means with height also. So we have tried to analyze this data to understand the impact of transport of drop, as well as if there are, because this is vegetated area, and of course there can be forest, there can be local fires also, there can be local biomass burning as well. So we are trying to understand the sources and as well as atmospheric processes. So people talk about, when you want to understand or predict the climate change, of course you have to understand the trend of BVOCs itself. But measurement will not give you much clear picture, because unless we have kind of very continuous and well represented measurement, we will not be able to understand, because these are short-lived species and variability is too much. The causes of variability are many, but still we need to understand the the trend over South Asia region, because it is very important to predict the ozone as well as formation of secondary organic aerosol, because the because of change in climate, uh, warming conditions, there is a change in the biosynthesis as well as the emission of VOCs from the biogenic sources. And of course this will change, not only change the emission rates, but also it will change the chemical reaction rates as well, because of change in temperature also. So ultimately this will impact the gas particle partitioning process. So this is very important to understand, but we don't have, also only the measurements can give the trend. There is no other way, because the uncertainties in the emission models are very big. And trends, when we talk about trends, we have to be we have to be very sensitive as far as emission is concerned, accurate and sensitive. But yes, without uh, much observation, uh, you know researchers have attempted to predict the changes or to stabilize the trend. But you can see that first of all the level itself is varying so much, and then how do you get, suppose here you have 300 teragram per year, you have almost 600, so it's double. But if you see the trend that change is not that much, then what to believe it, which model to believe, or which scenarios to believe, or which scheme to believe, that's the challenge. And all these things come because, so first of all we have to understand why so much, the base itself is so different, and from model to model. That is mostly coming from the lack of measurements. So lack of measurement will always give this kind of scenario. So it is very difficult, or it is not possible to see the trend. Nonetheless, if you follow certain um, uh, mission model, then in recent time there has been some increasing trends they have kind of reported. So that is also kind of way. So that were associated with the land change and land cover related to the global climate change. But of course, as I mentioned, these are very uncertain. So to contribute, so as mentioned, there is lack of measurements. So we have taken some initiative to understand the biogenic VOCs, and we have been doing some measurements here, and we are planning for the VOC, BVOC studies in the central forest regions, also in the coastal regions of western coast, eastern coastal region as well. Here we have measurements in Goa. So of course, long way to go, but our objective is to do continuous measurement. So here our measurement is very. It's not like going in a campaign or we are collecting some samples and analyzing. No, we have continuous measurements at these sites. So such studies are such measurements are very important for the studying the trend. Okay, so so a lot more to be done, but so I'm kind of towards the end of my presentation. I hope I I highlighted the importance of VOC studies or VOC studies over this part of South Asia. We have very little information, and the model lacks proper representation as far as VOC data, because we may have some better understanding about anthropogenic data, anthropogenic views, but biogenic VOCs, they are not kind of validated over this part of the world. And more understanding, the process understanding is also very important. When you want to extrapolate certain measurements, then we have to understand what are the factors controlling the emission fluxes of VOCs. So parameterization is very, very important if you want to extrapolate from local to the regional. So the emission flux measurement is very, very important. Of course, I showed about vertical data. So for South Asia, I have shown only the lower measurement at ground and directly at upper troposphere. But we do what is happening in between. What is happening at 5 km, what is happening at 10 km, or in the middle troposphere. We don't have any information. As I said, is it like what we have, what is found over the Amazon, or it is something different? So ultimately, the story is that the conclusion is that we need greater attention as far as the studies of biogenic views is concerned over the South Asia region. With this, I once again thank you. I thank the organizers, for allowing Samina, for giving me this opportunity to share my works, my understanding, and I hope all success for your next presentations in this series. Thank you.